Good morning. I'm Stephen Leake. I'm an elder at First Presbyterian Church of Mesquite, Texas, and I'm also the teacher of the Discipleship Sunday School class. Today we continue with our study of the Gospel of John. Last week we finished chapter 12, and this week we're going to start with a very long passage from the beginning of chapter 13, the story of when Jesus washed the disciples' feet. And it will take us more than one lesson to get through this important story. I'd like to remind you that our curriculum is based upon the Daily Bible Study Series by Professor William Barclay, and that we're using the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible for our scripture readings. So let's get started with this important story from John chapter 13, verses 1 through 17. Now before the festival of the Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. What a beautiful sentence that is. The devil had already put it into the heart of Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray him. And during supper, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel that was tied around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus answered, "You do not know now what I am doing, but later you will understand." Peter said to him, "You will never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you will have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "One who has bathed does not need to wash except for the feet, but is entirely clean. And you are clean, though not all of you." For he knew who was to betray him. For this reason he said, "Not all of you are clean." After he had washed their feet, had put on his robe, and had returned to the table, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have set you an example, that you should also do as I have done to you. Very truly, I tell you, servants are not greater than their master, nor are messengers greater than the one who sent them. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them." We shall have to look at this passage in far more aspects than just this one, but first of all, we'll take it as a whole. Few incidents in the gospel story so reveal the character of Jesus and so perfectly show his love. When we think of what Jesus might have been and of what he might have done, the supreme wonder of what he was and did comes home to us. First, Jesus knew all things had been given into his hands. He knew the hour of humiliation was near, but he also knew that his hour of glory was near. Such a consciousness might well have filled him with pride, and yet, with the knowledge of the power and the glory that were his, he washed his disciples' feet. Love is like that. When people fall ill, those who love them will perform the most menial services and delight to do so, because love is like that. He knew that he was Lord of all, and yet he washed his disciples' feet. Second, Jesus knew that he had come from God and that he was going to God. He might well have thought that he was finished with the world now, for he was on the way to God. It was just at that time when God was nearest to him that Jesus went to serve others. To wash the feet of the guests at a feast was the job of a slave. The disciples of the rabbis were supposed to render their masters personal service, but a service like this would never have been dreamt of. The wonderful thing about Jesus was that his nearness to God brought him nearer to people. It's always true that there is no one closer to their fellow human beings than men and women who are close to God. The nearer we are to suffering humanity, the nearer we are to God. Third, Jesus knew this also. He was well aware that he was about to be betrayed. Such knowledge might easily have turned him to bitterness and hatred, but it made his heart love all the more. The astounding thing was that the more people heard him, the more Jesus loved them. It's so easy and so natural to resent wrong and to grow bitter under insult and injury. But Jesus met injury and disloyalty with humility and love. There is more in the background of this passage than John tells us. If we turn to Luke's account of the last meal together, we find the tragic sentence. A dispute arose among them as to which of them was to be regarded as the greatest. That from Luke chapter 22, verse 24. For within the sight of the cross, the disciples were even arguing about precedence and prestige. It may well be that this very argument produced the situation which made Jesus act as he did. Now we know the roads of Palestine were unsurfaced. In dry weather, dust was inches deep, and in wet weather, the roads were liquid mud. The shoes people ordinarily wore were sandals, which were simply soles held to the foot by a few straps. They gave little protection against the dust or the mud on the roads. For that reason, there were always great water pots at the door of a house, and a servant was there with a pitcher and a towel to wash the feet of the guests as they came in. Jesus' little company of friends, of course, had no servants. The duties which servants would carry out in wealthier circles, they must have shared among themselves. It may be on the night of this last meal together that they were in such a state of competitive pride that no one would accept this menial duty. No one had bothered to see that water and towels were there to wash feet as they came in. And Jesus mended their omission in the most vivid and dramatic way. He did what no one else was prepared to do. Then he said, "You see what I have done? You call me your master and your Lord, and you are quite right, for so I am. And yet I am prepared to do this for you. Surely if I do this, you ought to be prepared to do it also. I am giving you an example of how you ought to behave toward each other." This ought to make us think. So often, even in churches, trouble arises because someone was not get his or her place. Here is the lesson that there is only one kind of greatness, the greatness of service. The world is full of people who are standing on their dignity when they ought to be kneeling at the feet of their brothers and sisters. When we are tempted to think of our dignity, our prestige, our rights, let us picture the Son of God wrapped in a towel, washing the disciples' feet. The people who stoop like that, like Christ, are the people whom we honor, and the people whose memory we will not let die. Thank you for joining me today. God bless each and every one of you.